Jimmy, I'm at it.
Hey, Jimmy.
Where are you from, Jimmy? They asked us.
Piedmont area. I remember when this book came out. And the way we did the first one, the first workshop I ever did on the concepts, we sat down and read it together and talked about what it meant. How many people in this room have read this book? If you read it, you ought to know what they mean. I mean, because they're simple. They're not complicated. We try to complicate stuff just like we try to complicate our recovery. I mean, it's real simple. For me, the first concept is carrying the message is about creating an area to do things that groups aren't able to do. Or don't have time to do. I'm not going to say not able to do, because my home group's probably got several folks that's really able to do it, but because they taught me. But the it's not. I try to keep stuff simple, and if I can keep it simple, then I ain't got to. When folks want to argue about stuff, I just go back to the simple stuff. I don't try to complicate it. I mean, the groups aren't able to do H&I, PI. I mean, I remember a time when groups did do H&I, but PR, excuse me, I'm still back a few years, but the group is the most important way of carrying the message, but it's not the only way. I mean, H&I, PI, or PR, they let folks know that we're here so they can come to our meetings. Because when I got clean, until I went to rehab, I never heard anything. And the guy that brought the meeting in, I got to see him. He relapsed after I got clean, and I hadn't seen him in 20 years, and I went to an area meeting and he was there. It was pretty cool. But Jeremy talk to somebody, because I can't talk.
Thanks, Jimmy.
My name is Jeremy. I'm an addict.
Hey, Jeremy.
And I'm from the East End area, and somehow I end up getting consistently asked to do these types of workshops. I think it's because I tend to do a lot of service, but I always feel inadequate to talk about what the concepts are. And the reason I say that is because that's generally part of my nature, but also because I don't spend a lot of time thinking about the concepts when I'm doing service, other than the time when they're read. The only time that they ever really come up in this to have a lot of conversation about what they mean and what they're for is if one is called into question, and somebody says this is violating our traditions, or this is violating our concepts. And then, of course, for me, I go to the book and I try to figure out, because I have my opinions about things, I try to figure out whether what they're saying is valid, whether what they're saying has merit, so we can move forward in a positive way beyond their concerns and make sure that they feel heard and stuff like that. So it's like the only time they ever really come up is if they're being questioned. And it's funny because I have a ton of opinions myself, but I think that whether something violates our traditions or our concepts is really relative, to me. I mean, I have my own perception of things. I have my own moral compass, and what offends me or what I believe violates a particular concept is based on me and my beliefs. And it doesn't mean that it affects NA as a whole, And a lot of times I get caught up, a lot of times I've seen people get caught up in that idea, like if this is affecting me, then it's affecting NA as a whole, and that just has not proved to be true in my experience so far, because most of the times when these things come up is in some kind of regional meeting or meeting like that where somebody's trying to block a decision that's being made on behalf of the body and using a concept or a tradition to do so. And every time that I've seen that happen, it's never actually been passed, because you're hard pressed to get somebody to fall in line with the way you've been perceived that this has been an offense. And so in order to get the conscience to shift, I mean, most of the time the conscience is already clear before we already start. So I got a new sponsor about 3 years ago, and it's a sponsor that's not from our area. Met him at the World Service Conference and really just connected with him. And I had the same sponsor for about 10 years before that, and was looking for something new. I had worked the steps a couple of times with him, and this guy prayed in a similar ways to the way I pray, and there's all kind of things that were working. And as soon as we started working, he had me start looking up words, which is something my other sponsor didn't do. So I was like regretting that decision pretty much immediately. Because I like to think that I know what's best for me, of course, but what I found in doing that, and like when we work steps in the flat book, and I had to look up every single word of every single step, other than stuff that was being repeated, So what I found is that although I had a pretty good idea of what words meant to me, they were also skewed by my own perception. And so when I was looking at words in the definition in the dictionary, and I had to look them up in an actual dictionary, I couldn't use my phone. Couldn't use anything electronic. It had to be paper, and all this stuff had to be handwritten. I had to rewrite the definitions. So a lot of work went into the steps with this guy. But it made me realize that the way I make stuff up sometimes is not always correct, and more often than not, it's off, So when I got asked to do this workshop, I started messing around with thinking about what these words meant, and so I wanted to kind of share some of those things with you, and then our hope was to have this be as interactive as possible to get all of y'all involved, because we only learn through participation, right? We learn through talking about these things ourselves. And so I'm going to read some definitions that I found. I found some principles behind the concepts, and the way I want to see it go is that I'll kind of do this overview myself, and then we'll go back to the top of the list and start, and then we'll include anybody that particular principle calls to share their experience, strength, and hope on what that means to them, and how it's been either impacted their recovery in a negative way when they wasn't behaving in that way, and how it's been a positive impact in their recovery by behaving in those ways. So the word concept, of course, was the first one that popped out, and for me it was an idea or context for the way a particular activity is supposed to work or operate. The word "supposed" stuck out in there for me because, of course, that means the way I think it should be. But the web, I did this on the web today because I was just doing it, but the web said an abstract idea, a conception, an idea or mental picture of a group formed by combination of all their aspects. And the next one that really stuck out to me was it says an experimental model. And that usually means something to do with cars, right? But it makes sense to me in the way I've seen that our service structure works. We're always trying to figure out the best practices. We're always trying to figure out the way things work the best, moving from Robert's rules to consensus, because it seems to be a more spiritual thing, although it may slow the process down. But the term experimental means that we can try anything we want to do, and if it doesn't work, we do something different. And if it does work, we keep doing those things. So that was pretty cool. The list I found was I don't think this is an official NA thing, but this says I don't think that the honesty, hope, faith, courage, the list of principles behind the 12 steps are like official either. But this says concept 1, responsibility. Concept 2, authority. Concept 3, delegation. Concept 4, leadership. Concept 5, accountability. Concept 6, spiritual guidance. Concept 7 is participation. Concept 8 was communication. Concept 9 was open-mindedness. Concept 10 was fairness. 11 was financial responsibility. And 12 was service, not government. Before I go any further, what did really stick out to me in that particular list was the fact that we put spiritual guidance right there in the middle instead of like at the beginning. You know, and in the traditions, it's like very early on that we're inviting God into that situation. But for some reason, in the service structure, we didn't add it in until halfway through. You know, maybe we were getting along and doing whoever was creating these things was like getting in their work and like, oh shit, we better invite God into this, or it's really going to get jacked. You know, so maybe we need to review and maybe get that at the top of the list. But that's what they came up with. For that. So I decided to look up some of those words, you know, and the first thing I came up with was responsibility. It says a duty to deal with something, a state of being accountable or to blame for something. And I'm actually the regional delegate for the state of Georgia, and so I'm getting ready to go to the World Service Conference on y'all's behalf, and there's going to be some decisions that have to be made out there, you know, that aren't going to be me being able to call everybody in the Georgia region and see what they think about it and how I should vote, you know. And so I'm going to have to be willing to not only be accountable when I come back to say this is the reasons I made the decisions I made, this is the reasons that I chose to vote this way on one thing, but also be willing to suffer the consequences if they don't like what I did, you know. So accepting the accountability and the blame. And then the last one on responsibility that stuck out the most to me was a moral obligation to behave correctly or in respect of, you know, and I didn't have that when I first got clean. It wasn't something that was part of my nature, wasn't something that was part of what I did, even though I had children, you know, I was not responsible to them. They got the last little bit of crumbs of money I had left over if I had not used it all up, you know, and so it was a very scary thing. As I got more further along in recovery, like I actually got addicted to being responsible. It was weird because I was finally learning that I could give my word and I could keep my word and that somebody could count on me. So I was like addicted to people counting on me, and it made me feel good that somebody thought, if I ask Jeremy to do this, you know, he's actually going to show up and do it. You know, and so I was like making commitments left and right. Anything anybody asked me to do, I was like, yep, I'll do it. And that ended up getting me in a bad place. You know, 'cause at one point I had like 7 service commitments and wasn't doing none of them well. So fortunately I had a sponsor that told me to dial that stuff back. So that's me on responsibility. You want to say anything about responsibility, Jimmy? And then we'll let one of them go. Anybody want to say anything about responsibility in their life? I'm going to call on somebody if you don't volunteer, so. Right.
Hi, name Rodney.
Hey, Rodney.
You know, for me, you know, like responsibility in my life, one of my main priorities of responsibility is my daughter. You know, I have 6 kids, 4 of them that I haven't spoken to or seen in like 15 or 16 years. Oldest of being 29 this July. And my youngest daughter lives with me. She's 16. And, you know, me and her mother both were, you know, not really good actors. You know, we were definitely like everybody else. You know, we had our fair share of degradation and everything. Being responsible to raise children has not been one of my best suits. You know, I gave up my first 4 children to my first wife's new husband because I needed more money for those. And the responsibility for me today is, you know, the money that I have, I need to try and be responsible first and foremost for my children. and give them whatever they need for a good education, a good place to live, the countable amount of food or diet that they need, and that plays into my life, one of the main responsibilities that I have, and I take care of myself the best that I can first, with my program, and then that falls over into her life, and I do the best that I can. I can't take care of everything all at once, but I do what I can. That is my main priority. Thanks very much, Jay.
Thanks, Rodney.
Thanks, Rodney. Want to jump in, Jimmy? All right, the next concept, I should probably just read these out again, but concept 2 says the final responsibility and authority for NA services rests with the NA groups. And the word I looked up in there was authority. It says, I really like the first definition of this, just because I like to be in charge, but it says power or right to give orders. That's not something that we're really talking about here, but make decisions and enforce obedience. I'm like, damn, I wish I could pull that off in my own household, but my old lady wears the pants. I just show up and do what I'm told. The next definition is really what stuck out as the most relevant to what we do in Narcotics Anonymous, and it was the right to act in a specified way, delegated from one person or organization to another, official, permission, or sanction. I believe that my sponsor, my initial sponsor, showed me the way. He was big in service and designated a specified way for me to behave in service bodies, either as a GSR or in an area position or on the regional floor, and now as a conference participant. There is a specific way that I'm supposed to carry myself. I can't go out there and show out and act any kind of way. And so authority, on that first definition, is about me being in charge, but authority meaning that something has been given to me in respect for how I should behave, means that I have a responsibility to behave a certain way. And I'm representing the state of Georgia. It's not Jeremy L. out there on the conference floor. It's the regional delegate from the state of Georgia. And so if I carry myself in that way, it puts me out of the spotlight and puts the state of Georgia in the spotlight, So if I'm being the person that I think Georgia is, or how I believe Georgia wants to be representative, then I think I'll do a much better job in inviting God into that way and showing that Georgia is a full member of Narcotics Anonymous and we care about the decisions we're making. So anybody else want to talk about authority and what that means to them?
My name's George.
Hey, George.
In the last couple of years, I know in my area, in particular, we had issue with people manipulating the literature and handing it out at meetings. And, I don't have any problem with anyone applying whatever they want to apply in their own personal program. But don't bring that stuff to our newcomer. And through this process, I reached out to people in the region with more clean time than myself, people that I respected and that had more knowledge about the entire situation. And I even reached out, all the way up to some contacts that I have out in California. And, it was pointed out to me that, the fellowship has authority over the fellowship property. And if anyone's familiar with the Fellowship Intellectual Property Trust, the people that were pushing this stuff were basically trying to milk the fellowship, trying to get them to take money out of the fellowship to sue them, to bring court action and to bring a bad light on the fellowship. And the people from the WSO just kind of pointed out to me through the concepts and the tradition that it's ultimately the authority of us, the members, the guy or girl at your home group, to say, hey, we're not comfortable with you doing this with our newcomer. This is not the way we do it. And And, you know, I identify what you talk about responsibility, because, you know, I'm definitely an egomaniac with an inferiority complex. One minute it's me beating on my chest, look at me, you know, I'm going to show y'all how to do this, and then the other thing is, oh, well, I'm possibly making the fellowship look bad. But there is a comfortable medium in there to where my home group or my area or even my region chose me for a position. And I am responsible to be that trusted servant and to do what I'm capable of doing. And, you know, as I'm a product of long-term treatment, and I remember sitting in there at about 14 months clean, and I had gotten fired from another job. And the director of the program, we're going through this shit in front of 40 different guys, all my brothers in the program. He's like, well, did you do your best? And I'm like, sure I did my best. And he said, no you didn't. And I'm like, well, how the hell can you say that? You weren't there, you don't know. He said, we've never seen your best. You've never seen. And see, every day that I walk in recovery, my best is improving just a little bit. And said trusted servant best is pretty damn good today too. So I think we are responsible to speak up and protect the fellowship and see the future. So that if there are no young people, there is no future for the fellowship. Anyway, thanks for letting me share.
Thanks for sharing.
Sharon, George.
Anybody else?
I'm Katie. I'm an
Hi, Katie.
authority is something that service and recovery has helped me work on. I tend to be, it's one of those things where we can come in and learn it through service and then take that out in the real world. You know, I can get a little aggressive. I can get a little, you know, I don't know. Service has been good for me for realizing that I am part of a whole, and that Narcotics Anonymous is a fellowship, and that everybody's points have value. So I may have my opinion and say, oh, well, this is, you know, I've been on this committee and this is what works best, and, you know, recognize the idea that anyone, whether they've got 30 years or 30 days, may come in with something that just works better for the area or the fellowship at that time or in general. And that's allowed me to be more open-minded and recognize that, you know, I struggled with that when I came in, the idea that like, oh, well, I'm chair of the committee or I'm this and I'm that, and, you know, looked at that as authority, but it wasn't authority, it was a trusted servant who was part of a whole, as opposed to just, you know, me trying to push whatever I saw as valuable in the group. And it's cool to see how service and the concepts is something that we can bring, like I said, into the real world. And as a member of Narcotics Anonymous, where I can now go out there and, you know, I don't have to be the authority on everything, and I don't have to, you know, take that word for whatever I want to manipulate the definition to suit me for. I can look at it as just recognizing the fact that it's nice that maybe there's some people who actually want to listen to what I have to say sometimes nowadays, and put me into a role that I can enjoy and get back in, and then take out there and, you know, not go and blow up at a job or somewhere like that I can actually hold on to things nowadays. So thanks.
Thanks for sharing.
I'm Jimmy, I made it.
Hi, Jimmy.
Most addicts don't like authority. I mean, they don't want nobody telling them what to do, when to do it, how to do it. And I remember when this came up for approval, there was a lot of discussion about authority. And it goes back to, we are trusted servants. Are you going to trust the people you elected? The most abused position I see is GSR. Because we'll put somebody that's got six months clean in GSR position, which is the most important position in this fellowship. I had 60 days when I became GSR. But luckily I had a sponsor that taught me. Damn, I lost my train of thought. But, you gotta be willing to carry. I mean, I've done, it was always hard back then, but I've done what Jeremy's doing. And, damn. I'm sorry I got throat problems. But, when I went to the World Service floor and I gave George's opinion, the chair didn't like it. And he told me I was a troublemaker. And I told him I wasn't a troublemaker. It was my region didn't agree with what, because he didn't agree with what my region agreed. Because it wasn't my opinion. My opinion was different than regions. But I had to carry it. And regions. The trust, we don't trust the people we elect. And we hadn't. I mean, it's better now than it used to be, but we still don't come close to trusting the people we elect. So we need to look at the people we elect. If you don't trust them, you don't need to vote for them. Bottom line. If I didn't trust Jeremy, I wouldn't vote for him. I hope if you don't trust me, you wouldn't vote for me. I learned that being chair of something is you have the least authority. Because all your job is to facilitate whatever meeting you're going to. You don't get a vote, you don't get, in Georgia you don't. I mean, in here it talks about you should, but Georgia's beliefs is different. If you are chair or something, you can give them folks out there the authority. You just guide them. But I remember the discussion on the regional floor when this came up for approval about giving folks authority. I mean, there was almost fights about, hell no, we ain't gonna do this. We've come a long ways. I don't know how many of y'all have ever looked at the history of the minutes when the region started. And because of some of the service positions I've had the opportunity to do that. And we've come a long ways. We do trust each other more today, but we still don't. If they do something we don't like, then we want to raise hell at them. But that's about all. I mean, I felt like I need to say something about authority and about the, being a chair. Damn sure don't give you no authority. I thought it did the first time I had a chair position. I found out real quick I didn't have none. I love y'all. Thanks.
Thank you, Jeremy.
All right, we'll go into concept 3 now. It says the NA groups delegate to the service structure the authority necessary to fulfill the responsibilities assigned to it. I looked up the word delegation. It said representatives, a group of people chosen to vote or act on behalf or for someone else. And that's the thing that means the most to me. It's like what Jimmy just said about how he went to the conference, and even though he didn't agree with what Georgia was saying, he carried their own vote because he was there to represent them. And I remember there was a time I was the RCN for the North Atlanta area at that point, and somehow our finances have gotten jacked or something, and we made a donation to the region, and they asked me to go and ask for the money back. Yeah. Which is not fun, by the way. And And we didn't get the money back. I didn't think we should even ask. But at that point, it wasn't about what Jeremy thought. I mean, I made my voice known on the floor of the area, of course, because that's my responsibility to do that, to fully participate in the decision-making processes, of course. But as the delegate, as the RCM at that point, it was my job to carry the conscience of the area. And so I went and presented our case and asked for the money back, and then got shot down. You know, and I've seen quite a few people do that on the region floor, coming there, presenting something from their areas that was definitely not of their own personal views. And I think that does, for me, that does. It's funny that you mentioned the chair thing too. What the most beneficial role that I've had for me in my recovery was when I was the facilitator of the region. You know, because I tend to be very opinionated. I make up my mind very quickly. I like to think very quickly. I like to use my words quickly against people. And so being the facilitator took my opinion out of the thing. It took my view out of it. All I had to do was manage the room. And so, I mean, I grew so much as a result of that position. And so being quick to judge and quick to make decisions and shut people off based on your views is something that you struggle with. Like, I suggest you take on a role of facilitator or chair or something that removes your opinion out of it. And it done wonders for me. I'm excited about the fact that delegation means it goes back to that trust that Jenny was talking about. Regardless if Tom, Dick, and Harry, who doesn't have a clue who I was in their home groups, at some point they trusted somebody else that does know who I am and said, oh, if you trust this guy, I'm going to go with it. And, you know, I believe that only reason that I get the opportunity to go and experience what I'm going to experience coming up in April was the fact that somewhere down the line somebody delegated the responsibility to me to have that opportunity, you know. So anybody want to talk about delegation in their life? Karen?
Hi, Karen.
First of all, thank you for your service, and anyone else that does it, because I'm not doing that. I wind up in jail or the first person banned from it. But when you were talking about the delegation and bringing that vote, I very clearly remembered Motorcycle Ed telling the story about what he had to bring the vote about to against that Georgia voted against having the basic test. And talking about the emotions of wanting something so bad, but having been given that responsibility as a delegate to carry that vote. And I think sometimes we talk about it at a 40,000 foot level, but not what does that do emotionally. And that was the first time I really learned that it's about putting yourself aside. And the other thing is that I've applied the concepts to my service commitments, but one of the things I don't hear a lot about the concepts A in conventions, so I'm really glad we're doing this, but the other one is we take this outside the rooms. We talk about taking the steps and the principles behind it. We talk about the traditions and the principles, but I think as working individuals or as business people, this is the one we take the most out into the world, and that needs to be practiced in some instances the most in order to have integrity and do what's ultimately right. I don't know if I'm explaining. It's like in my head, it's just not coming out right. But I think the idea that this works in a very, very big way outside of what we do in here. I just needed to mention that. So anyway, I'll shut up and listen. Thank you.
Thanks,
for
Karen.
sharing.
Thanks, Karen.
Jimmy? Want to go on? All right, concept.
Jeff,
Go
Hey,
ahead,
Jeff.
Jeff.
Jack.
To delegate the responsibility, one of the issues throughout all the time that I've been here, watched it done, had it done for me, and then had to do it in my business, with my child, with both my kids, and not to brag you, but I went back. No, stop. No, you come too far. we talk, you know, and I could be wrong, but I think in the second concept, we talk about responsibility and authority being the same side, you know, different sides of the same coin. I think it says that when you read into it. They all three fit together is, okay, I've given Jimmy the responsibility to go, I've delegated it, and now I've delegated the authority to make the decision. And one of these people is at my home across the aisle, and the other one's gone, but I'll never forget when a World Service Office person took the chunk instead of taking the vote and bought a pair of boots. He did something else on a credit card. And I knew how the Georgia region felt. And my wife kind of knew, but she stepped away to let our alternate make the vote. I lost my mind on the floor of the WSA. I was actually, according to some, I was the first person ever to be physically removed. I yelled at that man and told him he wouldn't be able to make coffee in his home. Because that's how the Georgia region felt. We were passionate about it. But the thing that I so loved today was to be able to turn and tell one of the guys, hey, it's your responsibility. You bid the job, you do the job. I don't even need to come back. If you need me to come by, I'll come by. I mean, I've got chills up down my spine thinking about doing that with my soon to be 21-year-old son. You know, it's so hard with him because he's a missionary in the inner cities. I mean, he goes into East St. Louis. He goes into the west side of Chicago. Stays there for periods of time. And I've said, hey, this is it. You're wrong. If you have a question, please come back and ask. And that's, I wish I could see that in Narcotics Anonymous. Is that Jeff's ego would get the heck out of the way and turn and go, Jimmy, I'm lost. I do not know what to do. Please help me. Instead of doing what I've done in the past, and he's been witness to it over the past 30-some odd years. Knives, guns, and everything else. Yeah.
Cheers.
Been there, done that, seen it. Sat in the room with it. But we've come so far if we were just applying. And when we ask, as Karen said this morning, you know, I've had a tendency to yell and call you a dumb MF and use a lot of language that wasn't necessary. And all I had to do was say, hey, I tried that, it didn't work. Go ahead, because I trust you that you're going to have NA's best interest. And that's just next to impossible for some of us. It's taken me forever to do it. I'm just grateful that I've been able to do it in both places.
Thanks for
Thanks
sharing.
for sharing. All right, number 4 says effective leadership is highly valued in Narcotics Anonymous. Leadership qualities should be carefully considered when selecting trusted servants. And the principle for that one is leadership. It's an act of leading an organization through guidance or direction. And I'm like addicted to leadership myself at this point because I just think I can do everything better than everybody else, and so I might as well be in charge. I'm working on it. But also being in leadership has, like Karen said a while ago, is like that's some of these things are the things that I carry out most into my life. I mean, I currently own a business that employs 17 people, right? And so my job on a regular basis is to inspire them to be their best, you know, and that takes leadership, and it takes, for me, it takes patience, you know, because We hired quite a bunch of millennials, and not all of them have the greatest work ethic that I've ever seen. And they're very entitled and very hard to motivate. But they also have this, they're not like terrible, you know. So with the right amount of guidance and the right amount of direction, like there's potential there, you know. And I go back to remembering that's what all my teachers told me. You got so much potential. If you would just shut your damn mouth and stop talking and listen, open your ears. I mean, same thing we learn when we get here, right? It was like coming to the rooms with all this potential. And if it wasn't for the people that brought me into service, like I don't think I would be where I am now. You know, it's like I got drugged. I remember the guy from Turnaround was like, "Come on, we're going to this convention. Sit at this table and hug everybody that comes up to the table." You know, that was like my first service position. I was like, supposedly I was like registration co-chair. I didn't do shit about registration. I just sat beside the person that was actually doing registration. But I did hug everybody that was at the convention, so that was cool. But that person was being a leader in my life. You know, it was like taking me down the path. Like he saw potential in me and saw that I may be able to do something. And that was what leadership is for me, is like finding a way to inspire greatness in other people, you know, and also being able to see that greatness, because a lot of times we come in I came in so dejected and lost that I didn't see any greatness or any possibility for that in my life. And so somebody was a leader for me to show me the way. So, Jimmy?
Different people do different things. And everybody can't do everything. And you need to be able to admit to yourself first that you're not able to do. For a long time, I wouldn't share anything. I wanted to be the one doing the work and let somebody else take the responsibility of sharing it. Sooner or later, I was told I had to take the responsibility. I'm struggling with that right now, delegating to my son, my 40-year-old son, who is one of us that struggled forever to get clean. Give him my business. You know, I'm struggling right now because he didn't answer the damn telephone this morning. I got 5 things he needs to do today, and he ain't answered the damn telephone yet. But if I don't ever let him do it, he won't ever be able to do it. I know that was my experience in NA. You know, I do service today because I love this fellowship. And folks say, "Jimmy, you've been clean too long. You've done enough service. You need to quit." That's what's kept my ass here. You know, my sponsor still does, the sponsor I have today does service. The one I had for 26 years did service. That's what he taught me. You know, so I learned to apply the anonymity when I'm looking at electing somebody to a position. You know, it ain't just about because I don't like them. It ain't got nothing to do with that. I try to look at the principles and see, are they able? Have they tried to do this before and failed? If they have, then we need to give them to do something else, not that. And we need to be able to tell them that in a spiritual way. You know, I mean, Jeff's thing is selling shit. Jeff can sell ice water to an Eskimo. But, you know, I saw No, I'll hush. I won't even bring that up.
You let that.
Yeah, I will leave that
Tell
alone.
all
Because the first time, not the first time I met Jeff, but the first convention I came to was here in Jekyll in '91, and Jeff was merchandise chair. And he put me to work. Yeah, I mean, yeah. But, you know, he was delegating, and it made me feel a part of it. Because I had never been to a convention. I'd never been around that many recovering folks at one time. And that, you know, I got to meet a bunch of folks and got to hug a bunch of folks because he let me sell a t-shirt. I saw the bite since then. You know, but there's different ways. But I mean, we need to look at people because there is certain things that certain people do better than others. You know, I'm a worker better than I am a chairperson. I understand the responsibility of chairing now because it's about delegating authority for other folks to do stuff. Tell them what they need to do, have that single point of accountability, and let them go do it. That's hard for me as an addict because I want that control. You know? But, you know, I gotta it's just like with my son, I gotta let go of it or I'm gonna have to drive 3.5 hours back home, and I ain't doing that today. Well, so, that's all.
Thanks, Jim.
Anybody about leadership?
I'm Karen.
Call to them. Go
Hey,
ahead,
Karen.
Thank you guys for your service. You know, I saw 4 different facilitators on the region floor, and I saw some facilitators, or at least one, honestly, that didn't need to be there. They weren't cut for it, like Jimmy said. There are certain things that I know that I am not good at. There's no sense in me trying to be a treasurer of something like a regional area. You know, my home group's one thing for like really bitty, small, and I could probably handle that. But there's no sense in me doing that if I don't have the background to do it, the training to do that, to really crunch those numbers. But I'm very organized, and I was secretary, and I did secretary, and I was very organized with it, and did it fairly well. You know, of course, I got my butt chewed up quite a few times, and that's the other part of it. And in the delegating, I also seen the abuse that comes from delegation, because there have been members I have seen that have grabbed somebody and said, well, you sit proxy as GSR at region or at area this month because we're voting on whatever. And then they would feed that person their opinion of the vote, and then that person, not having a clue, would go and vote what was given to them. So I've seen where the warm person syndrome has done some damage in the past and created some monsters, and then the spirit of rotation is huge because we've had those issues in our area. And when I joined this area, there were 29 groups. We have 5 groups. We're getting smaller. It's hard because in Narcotics Anonymous, all the different avenues that people come in here, whether it's court orders or whatever brings us here, desperation, whatever. I know for me when I first got here, I didn't stick and stay. I did get on the service bandwagon and start doing service immediately, and that has been a huge part of my recovery. But I know that just because there's just a few people that do come and stick and stay, and it really is, that really come in and commit to this way of life, that sometimes it's slim pickings for positions. But we still have to be cautious. And then the other thing is sitting in a position, I have to be open to, if you question me about something that I'm doing in that position, because I've learned that me getting defensive is doing nothing to get to the solution. And I've seen that, and I've done that, where I've been questioned about something, and I've had questions about things, and I've gotten my ass chewed out at that moment and for the rest of the regional weekend. So sometimes it was right, sometimes it wasn't. So it's hard to keep personality out. It's a lot of growth in the service, but definitely with leadership, admitting, being pointed to something is not an accomplishment if I'm not able to do the job, because then I do the service to the position. Thanks for letting me share.
Thanks for sharing.
Keith, I'm an addict.
Hey, Keith.
I'm from Macon, Georgia. I've run my own sign company for years, for about 20 years, and then I run my own tattoo studio for about 30 years, working anywhere from 7 people to 17 people. So I know something about leadership, but I was always in the earlier part, I was always in active addiction of alcoholism and that drug, and then the later part, I was in an alcohol addiction of meth, crystal meth, and cocaine and crack and all that crap. That's what brought me. Anyway, that's what brought me back into the room this last time, 22 days ago. So I know something about leadership, and I know something about the lead. Now I'm 61 years old, bald-headed, and lost my wife last year. I tried to say that's the reason I went out, but that is I just went out. And I lost my mom this year, but I was able a few weeks ago, and at least I was able to go to her funeral and see her die and stay clean. So I'm glad to be here with y'all. Just wanted to share that part with y'all. Thanks for letting me share.
Thanks for
Thanks
sharing.
Concept 5 says, for each responsibility assigned to the service structure, a single point of decision and accountability should be clearly defined. And the word accountability was what I looked up, and it said just a state of being accountable or responsible. And I'm a highly goal-oriented type of person, which is funny because I didn't have any hopes and dreams when I got, literally the epitome of my dreams when I was using was like being old and retired and having my own trailer with a porch on it that I could sit around and drink beer and smoke pot on, and that was like the pinnacle of success. And so now being in recovery and realizing that the possibilities are limitless, I have a tremendous amount of things that I want to do in my life, and I've set a bunch of goals in my recovery, and I've achieved a bunch of stuff. But what I found is that the main thing that caused me to achieve those things was enrolling other people in the success of those things, and having somebody being willing to hold me accountable and hold my foot to the fire, because get left to my own devices, I can choose very easily to believe my own bullshit and then sell myself out, So the only way that I'm able to be held accountable is by inviting other people into that situation, telling people what I want to achieve in my life, asking other people to say, you have the responsibility to basically bitch slap me into position, in submission, if I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing. They're not asking me to make these goals based on what they think is right for me. They're saying, who do you want to be? Where do you want to go? What do you want to accomplish? And how can we help you get there? Which is day one recovery, right? Like, we don't care what you were. All we want to know is how we can help, and so help achieve this whatever kind of thing we want to have in our life. So accountability is very, very present in my life, and I strive in it and yearn for it. So does any accountability mean anything to anybody else?
I'm Risa, a recovering addict.
Hey, Risa.
I'm really grateful to be here. I really love hearing about the concepts, especially because when I first read them, I thought that about 3 or 4 of them were all saying the same thing with different words. And so it's really exciting to me to kind of hear people break it down. Accountability is a really interesting one for me. Last year, I was a co-facilitator of my area, and I kind of knew this when I took the position, but I really learned it when I got there, is that the co-facilitator in my area is kind of the workhorse of the area service position. One of the responsibilities is to take over as facilitator of any subcommittees that don't have a facilitator. And when I first started in the position, I thought, well, that's cool. Everybody's got a facilitator. H&I and PR do, and we didn't have an activity subcommittee at that time. So about 5 months in, our area formed an activity subcommittee of people who were interested in doing activities, but they didn't have a facilitator to be a point of accountability. And at the same time that happened, our PR facilitator decided to move and leave, and he gave us about a week's notice. And so I went from being the person sitting next to the guy running the meeting to being the person in charge of 2 subcommittees at once.
you know. And I've done activities before, but I had never done PR before. I came up through H&I, you know, and I had a service position at H&I at the time, so I felt like I was putting a lot of work out into these subcommittees. But you know, what happened was that I stepped up to be that point of accountability for each of those subcommittees, and so did everyone else step up around me to be responsible for those subcommittees. You know, PR had been a subcommittee of one, and that got moved. And suddenly, when I gave a statement at area that said, I've never done PR, I don't know what the heck I'm doing, I'm willing to be here, and you know, I'm willing to create a budget, and I'm willing to lead the meeting. Suddenly I had a subcommittee of 4 or 5 people, you know. Some people who had been doing PR in the past and weren't interested but now are. And then I had people who had never done it before but wanted to find out about it. And that to me is such an exciting mix of folks, you know. You get to do things maybe a little differently than you have in the past, and then you have that experience of people who know what they're doing, you know. And then the same thing kind of happened with activities. I had done activities in the past, and then, you know, 5 or 6 people who said, yeah, let's have a game night. Yeah, let's find out, you know, let's have a picnic, you know, and people who stepped up and kind of took responsibility. And so, like, to me, that idea of being accountable, when I take accountability and responsibility for myself, I think that is what inspires other people to do that as well. You know, when I step up and say, I'm willing to be responsible, I'm willing to be accountable, it gives other people the chance to do that as well. Because I can work to the extent of my ability, but and I can be responsible for myself, and I can be responsible for a group of people. But if those people aren't stepping up to be responsible within that group, then you can't really move forward anymore. And so to me, it's really exciting to see that idea of a point of accountability and responsibility within the subcommittee, within the service structure, because it's kind of, you know, I really like what Jeff said about responsibility and authority being 2 sides of the same coin, you know. That responsibility and that accountability that I display is what allows people to trust me with the authority to speak on behalf of a subcommittee or of an area or of a region. So that's what I got. Thanks for letting me share.
Thanks, Shannon.
Thanks, Teresa. Jimmy, you want to say anything?
I need to get through. We got 15 minutes to go through the rest of them.
No. Nobody's going to want to leave right on time. You can keep going.
Yeah.
Concept 6 is group conscience is a spiritual means by which we invite a loving God to influence our decisions, and spiritual guidance was what the principle behind that was. So seeking God's will for our actions. And the main thing that stuck out to me around that is the most relevant thing in my life right now. It really has nothing to do with quote unquote this level of service that we've been talking about, but it's in a sponsee that I have that finally started working some steps after like a decade, and he stayed clean, but I was like, he's like, I want to change some things in my life. I was like, well, you need to work some steps, you know. So he started working steps, and he's like a self-proclaimed atheist, you know. And so like I was talking to my sponsor about like, and he was like, in the 3rd step when we decided to turn our will over, he's like, that's like the crux of the rest of the steps, you know. So you got to figure out how you fit in line with that higher power. And so this guy's pretty scientific and likes to have things down to think things to death, you know. So I enrolled him in the conversation around how he believes that there's atoms in the world and elements and protons and neutrons and such like that, and they're pervasive in everything, right? And so I kind of got him to buy in and start praying to the universe, because that's how it's made up of, right? And then so we finally get down to working step 3, and like he's consistently answering the questions out of the flat book, and still like in his mind he's coming from like that I'm an atheist, I believe, but his answers to the questions are like full of hope and like full of God's, like I can see the God in there, you know. Just because I put a capital G on it doesn't mean he just hadn't got there. And then we finally got to he finally admitted, it's like he's coming to believe, right? It's like he's taken through step 3 for him to actually start getting what's there for step 2. But like he's starting to realize that is a thing, and he's like, I just want to have this personal connection, which I don't have yet, you know. And I was like, that just comes with time, you know. So that's what spiritual guidance was sticking out to me. It's like if I keep inviting God in, eventually, the more I invite him in, the more pervasive he's going to be in my life. And even for somebody that says they don't believe in God at all, you know, if we fake it till we make it. So anybody else talk about spiritual guidance in their life? Gary.
Hi family, I'm Sharon, I'm an addict. And spiritual guidance always start with love, unconditional love. If I can't love you, you don't want anything I got, you know, and it all starts with the spirit of love. And I've been taught how to do that real well here, because that's what I got when I showed up here. I was unlovable, and you guys love me unconditionally, and the rest just happens. When I make that my intention, my desire to be an active participant of Narcotics Anonymous cause, and the cause is that our promise is that any addict can stop using, lose the desire, and find a new way to live. That's our cause and our purpose and our promise. And it requires open-mindedness on my part. Like he said, I do sponsor people that don't have the same God that I have. And the first time I was introduced to that, I was scared to death. And my sponsor told me, just love her unconditionally, and the God of your understanding will do the rest. Thanks for letting me share.
I like that you mentioned participation, because that's the concept behind the next one. It says all members of a service body bear substantial responsibility for that body's decision and should be allowed to fully participate in its decision-making processes. Participation is the principle behind that. It says taking part in something. And I was not an active participant in my own life. You know, I was like on the hamster wheel, just doing the thing before I got here. You know, and now I believe I have the ability. The sad part for me in what I witnessed in some service bodies is that we don't always take the time to make sure the people that home groups or areas are sending that are ill-equipped to handle the position, that we take the time to make sure they're prepared to do what they need to do, you know, to orient it. I don't know how to say the word. Orientate. I don't like the word, but not everybody is prepared, and not everybody is able to participate at a particular level. But if I just run roughshod over them instead of taking the time to make sure they can and fully understand what's going on, then I'm not allowing them to participate. I'm not allowing them to learn their position. I'm not allowing them to enjoy the same experience that I had, you know, in what I got out of being of service. So participation, which is what we've been doing today. So anybody? John.
Thanks, John.
Hey, John.
You know, my sponsor brought me up to HNI. I didn't have a choice about participating. You know, I kind of just leave those have shared like I was told what to do. And fast forward a couple of years, and I'm halfway struggling to find participation for some of the HNI meetings we've got in my area. We have this really zealous new PR chair who has got an idea in her head that, well, there are 23 facilities in our area that we don't have HNI meetings at, and I want to be in half of those by the end of the year. And like I said, I love her spirit. Spirit's in the right place, but I'm telling her, well, we don't really have enough participation in our current HNI meetings to, like, we need to get what we've got going now to a point where I'm having to turn away people because I have too many willing participants. And it's strange the responsibility I've been given of, like, because it's the few people that are willing to do service, that are willing to help, they're willing to work, they're willing to go to Illinois, and they're willing to go 30 miles out of their way to help, to do what they can. But then it's other ones that are 5 minutes from a facility where I'm begging for help at, and they won't even they can't even go across the street from their house, basically. And like that's kind of where I'm struggling at right now. It's trying to support, help, and it's. I know that I'm participating in my recovery. I know that I'm hopefully participating in somebody else's recovery as well. I can't say that one way or another, but I mean, I might need to get more sponsees so I have some more unwilling participants. But which I'm waiting on because one of them just hit 90 days and he finally got the insurance and the tag on his vehicle and all that. So Joker, he's about to get some work put in his lap, which is what I was taught to do, which is the way it was brought to me. I wasn't asked to participate; I was told to participate. And I think that when we actually follow directions and because I know me, I hated authority, I hated looking to it, like working my fourth and fifth stuff, like I thought that I had a fear of authority. But for some reason, when I actually listened to the authorities that were doing that, I listened to what the authorities were telling me to do, whether it was they had on a blue suit or they were working 12 steps, life turned out. Life happened, life gets better. And if I participate, whether I'm willing or not, things get better than now. That's great. All I got.
Thank you.
All right. Probably won't get through them all, but this might be the most important one that we can talk about for the rest of the time, which is not necessarily what the concept says, but the principle for sure. So our service structure depends on the integrity and effectiveness of our communications. And communications had two definitions there. It said the imparting or exchanging of information, and this one, the one I like the best, it says the means of connection between people. And I don't always think about it like that. I usually think about the exchange of information because a lot of times I get caught up in, like I said, I'm goal-oriented and I'm task-oriented, so I get caught up in what's next to do. Let's do this. Okay, what's next? Let's figure this out. And I miss a lot of times what's happening around. I think my wife's calling me at this point, but she's probably ready to get out of the hotel room. But missing that connection, and that's the most important part of being in recovery, and that's why we don't do it alone. NA is never alone, because we need people in our lives. We need people to depend on each other. We need people to accomplish any of these tasks that we want to do in recovery. We want to, of course, expand our reach and expand the services we provide and make sure that we reach as many addicts as possible. And the only way that we can do that is by being in relationship with each other and connecting to other people and expanding our reach. So communication, anybody that wants to speak to that, and will probably be the end, according to Sherry. 1 minute.
My name's George.
Hey, George.
I think that's a tremendous topic, communication and the fellowship. I heard somebody sharing the opening meeting last night about where are all the young people. Since I stepped away from active service with GRCNA, I took on a couple of PR positions in a couple of HNI meetings. And anyway, I think it's really important for us as a fellowship that obviously are participating service members to do our very best to reach out to the addicts who are not here, and we're going to have to do it on their meetings. Just because we read the newspaper don't mean our 19-year-old kid reads the damn newspaper.
Thank you for sharing. Hi, family. I'm Sharon. I'm an addict. We have come to the end portion of our workshop. Let's give ourselves a hand and the speakers a hand. And we will close this meeting with the Serenity Prayer.